that particular period of time where I was ministering throughout West Wales. And then the testimonies were always inspiring, because you never knew who was going to volunteer to come and give a story. So all the stories were spontaneous and were very thrilling and challenging as well. And then of course we had the neighbourhood all charged up to be part of it. And then the carnival, of course, going down the main street. And we didn't win the cup that year, but we did the year after. That showed how excited everything was. And we had banners up, of course, across the street here, and it was a carnival atmosphere, both inside the chapel and outside the chapel. Yeah.
Do you remember the specific cases that we filmed? There was a case of a lady in orange who, I can't remember what was wrong with her, but you asked her to run up and down.
That's right.
Tell me about what you remember about the cases we featured.
Yes, I think she was the lady with asthma, if I remember rightly. And what we usually do, you see, Jesus usually got people to do something. He would say, rise, take up your bed and walk, or he would say, go to the pool of Siloam and wash, and things like that. And they came spontaneously to me too, to get people to do something. And it was often in the doing that the thing was really manifested. And so I'd ask her to come out and run up and down and so on. I've had a number of wheelchair cases where I prayed with them, taken their hands, walked out the wheelchair. I got into the wheelchair and they pushed me around the church or the hall. And I've gone home, walking home with someone else pushing the wheelchair. And things like that.
Now when we came up to film, we were filming, and in the congregation there was a psychiatrist who obviously challenged you about all of this. What can you remember about all of that?
Well, the thing I remember about the psychiatrist was this. I felt a little sorry for him really, because each testimony that he challenged, we provided an answer till we came to the Stephen King situation. And then when you talk about taking x-rays showing that this did happen, and there's the proof there medically, and then you've got Anne, his mother, who was a state registered nurse working in an orthopaedic hospital, who arranged all that without my asking. And what you say is something concrete there that you can't argue with. And that's why I felt sorry for him really, because he couldn't explain that, you see.
Now what cynics would say is that in the case of Stephen King, children's hips can heal very quickly, and subsequently orthopaedic surgeons said, well, it could have happened naturally. Of course there is no proof either way, but a cynic would say, as he did at the time, that there might be a normal medical explanation for it. What do you say to that?
A simple answer. About 5 years ago in Cornwall, I met a gentleman of about 75 years of age he would be, and he had problem with both hips, and he could hardly walk, and he was waiting for me. His name was Wilf Warbridge.
Can we go back to, because we haven't got much time, talking about Stephen, what would you say about Stephen's case? Without going to another case, because we can't compare them, because we haven't got the extras from the other case.
I see.
When we're talking about Stephen's case, and the psychiatrist was cynical, and the cynic would say, well, that particular case could have healed naturally, and the x-rays were taken quite a time apart. What would you say to them?
Oh, well, I would quote other cases similar to Stephen's to prove that in older people the same thing happened. Yeah, I can do that, yes. But these are not testimonies that I've particularly asked for. It's people who have volunteered to tell me their stories. And I've been overwhelmed with the way they've explained what has happened to them.
Back to the Stephen case, how did that come about then? If you can talk me through how you came in contact. Basically, I want you to tell me about the prayer cloths and about how they came to his mother and what she did, and from there.
Wait for the car.
I'll just wait for the car. I'm asking Stephen's...
Yes, well, what happened was Mrs. Stephen came to see me.
Hang on, Mrs. King, isn't it?
Sorry.
Right, sorry, my fault.
Okay.
Right, okay.
And I did what the Apostle Paul did in the book of Acts. He prayed over handkerchiefs and aprons and sent them to the sick as points of contact. That's all they were. Like you might switch the light on in your home, it's a point of contact, but it makes a difference between dark and light. And I prayed over this handkerchief, and she placed it while Stephen was in bed asleep. And then she had this amazing experience of feeling something happening under her fingers. And actually she felt the miracle taking place, because next morning, after she'd done that, Stephen was bouncing about on the bed and he could run up and down and kick a football and everything. And out of sheer curiosity, she took him back, being an orthopaedic nurse, and had him x-rayed. And it was the x-ray that proved to her that something amazing had happened. And that's how the story broke. It came from the mother, Anne. It was wonderful, really.
And what do you think happened there that night with the prayer cloth? What do you think happened?
The power of the Holy Spirit came upon Stephen at the point of contact, like when you use the light switch and it brings the light into a dark room. And the power of God came upon him. And the mother felt it. So Anne the mother felt it, of course, and we now know what it was, and I now know subsequently with the other testimonies I've heard it's the same thing that happens.
So
and it happened with me.
When people say it could have healed naturally, do you accept that that's a possibility at all? What would you say to them?
Well, no, the evidence so proves otherwise. That's I've got to face the evidence and be an honest judge of what has happened. I know natural healings take place in my ministry. You know, sometimes it doesn't happen that way. It happens because I advise them to do certain things or suggest they do this, that and the other from years of experience, and they can be healed gradually.
And what was it like seeing Stephen today?
Fantastic, unbelievable. And that is not that I'm not used to this sort of thing, I am. But when you've got a gap of 37 years and it still holds good, because a lot of folks say, oh, it's a flash in the pan, oh, it'll only last this time next year, if then. But when you've got an ageing situation of 37 years, I think it's fantastic.
And when you think back to when we filmed here and what was going on in that church at the time, talking about what was happening in the church, the one thing that the psychiatrists and the critics said at the time was that people came into the church and they wanted to believe what they were seeing, they wanted to be healed, and it was a mass hysteria, and their minds took over, and it was that within them that caused them to behave in that way. What would you say to that?
Well, faith is a very important, because I've always said faith is the lifeline to heaven, and if you can trust God, then you can be blessed. I don't know why God's laid down that criteria, but it's there and it works. If you have faith, anything can happen. Jesus said, only believe and all things are possible. That's the answer to that, really.